8.
You're watching Experience Comic Culture and Sales. Streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
2, 1.
So a woman goes to a funeral home to make arrangements for her late husband's death or his service. And she tells the director that her husband's final request was for him to be buried in a dark blue suit. Now, the funeral director asked, well, wouldn't it just be easier to bury him in the black suit that he's already wearing? But she says, no, his wish was to be buried in a dark blue suit, and that's what I want for him. And she gives him a check and says, get him a dark blue suit and, make it happen. Well, when she finally comes back for the funeral, and it's an open coffin, and she looks up, and sure enough, her husband is wearing this beautiful dark blue suit, and he looks great. I mean, he looks better than he ever has. I mean, it's just so good. And she's really happy with it. And after the service, she goes up to tell the funeral director how much she appreciated all their work and that she really loved the suit, and asked how much it cost. And he says, actually, it didn't cost anything. So the funniest thing happened. As soon as you left, another corpse came in, and he was already wearing a blue suit. And I noticed that they were about the same size. So I asked the widow if she would mind if her husband was buried in a black suit. And she said that was fine with her. So I just switched heads. Stay tuned for the Dan Wickline Show. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Dan Wickline Show here on The Experience. We are driving to 2,500 subscribers. We're getting really close. I think we're like 130 away. So please tell your friends about the channel. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so already. If we can get to 2,500 by Saturday, which is Small Business Saturday, but it's also November 25th, then during the shows that we'll be playing, which will celebrate Small Business Saturday, we will be giving away 1 in 25 variant comics. So only 130 away. That's pretty good. So, all right, let's take a look who we got here today. We got Ed, we got Cool, we got Triple B, Arachnoid, Kenneth, and Lyle. Good to see you all. Glad you are here. We're going to cover the latest news, including some big changes in the Star Wars world, more casting for Superman Legacy, and some potential Karate Kid movie news. Also, we're going to talk about one of the characters that was popped up in the post-credit scene of the Marvels. So, and what that might mean for the MCU going forward. But let's go ahead and jump into the news. I'm going to save the Superman Legacy stuff for the end. So we're going to start with the fact that it seems Jackie Chan and Ralph Macchio, who have never appeared together on screen, are likely to come together in an upcoming Karate Kid movie. Now, both of them have appeared in the franchise. Macchio, of course, played Daniel LaRusso in the early films with Pat Morita as Mr. Miyagi, while Jackie Chan played Mr. Han, the Kung Fu master who helped Jaden Smith in the 2010 remake. So they're going to be coming together in this movie. and it's going to be moving the mythology behind the franchise forward. John Entwistle, Jonathan Entwistle. John Entwistle, of course, was the bass player for The Who. Jonathan Entwistle, who wrote The End of the Effing World, directed it, is directing this from a script by Rob Lieber. And it will come out from Sony Pictures. It's supposed to be out next year. It's supposed to be December 13th, 2024. And since the strikes are over, I think there's a good chance that'll happen. Moving on to DC news. The Penguin is heading back into production. The Max DC series, which stars Colin Farrell in the spinoff of the Batman movie, is going to start back shooting now that the SAG-AFTRA strike has been settled. Production on the series will resume the week after Thanksgiving. Variety is saying that, that it's going to pick back up. It's originally began in March 2023, but was suspended in June because of the writer's strike and then the actor's strike. Farrell will be back as Oswald Cobblepot. And this is going to be following him immediately after the conclusion of the Batman. Now that Falcone is out of the picture, we're going to be following Cobblepot's rise to power in the Gotham underworld to become one of Batman's most feared villains. Along with Farrell, the cast includes Kristen Milotti, Renza Feliz, Michael Kelly, Shohreh Aghdashloo, Deidre O'Connell, Clancy Brown, Carmen Ejogo, Francois Chow, Theo Rossi, and David H. Holmes. This will be an 8-episode series. Lauren LaFranc is the writer, as well as the executive producer and the showrunner. So Ed says, did you say The Karate Kid was going to be a movie or a series? It's going to be a movie. They're going to make a new movie, and they're going to bring together Ralph Macchio's Daniel and Jackie Chan's Mr. Han. At least that's what's being reported. All right, moving over to WandaVision news. It seems that a deleted scene has been released. You can probably find it out there. And in the deleted scene, it answers one of the questions that was kind of left over when the series ended. What the hell happened to the witness that Randall Park's Jimmy Woo character was looking for? Well, it turns out in the deleted scene, Jimmy is talking to some other FBI agents, telling them to keep an eye out for the witness and that it should be easy to identify them because they're wearing an ankle tracker or an ankle monitor. So, while that's going on in the background, we see somebody run over to a fire truck, pull out a pair of bolt cutters, and cut off an ankle monitor. And if you don't pay too close of attention, it just looks like anybody, but who it turns out to be is Evan Peters. So at least in the deleted scenes, Evan Peters was the missing witness, which then you have to wonder, the Ralph Boner persona, was that the character's name, or is that who he was hiding as a witness? Or was that a creation of Wanda when she created the Hex? Because he also looks different. His hair is shorter and flatter in the deleted scene than where we get more of the Quicksilver look in everything else he's in. So maybe he isn't Ralph Boner after all. And that should make a lot of people happy who really hated the Ralph Boner joke. Fans of the Muppets will be a little disappointed to hear that the Electric Mayhem Band, the TV show, The Muppets Mayhem, that focused on the Electric Mayhem Band, is not getting picked up for a second season. The show was created by the Goldbergs creator, Adam F. Goldberg, who is also currently writing the Garbage Pail Kids series for Dynamite. But it was a 10-part series. It was released back in May to almost no fanfare. And yeah, even though Goldberg has wanted to expand the Muppetverse, this one just didn't click and is not getting a second season. So Animal and Dr. Teeth and all of those guys will have to go back to doing background band music. This is a pretty huge story. Star Wars has found its Kevin Feige in a sense. And this is not going to surprise a lot of you who it is, because it's been kind of going that direction. But according to reports, Dave Filoni is expanding his footprint in a galaxy far, far away. The longtime Star Wars force has been named Chief Creative Officer at Lucasfilms. Now, Filoni told Vanity Fair, who was the first to report this, in the past, in a lot of projects, I would be brought into it. I would see it after it and already developed in good ways. But now Filoni will be involved in the early development of all Star Wars projects. And he's going to be working with Lucasfilm head Kathleen Kennedy and head of development Carrie Beck. Now, the move comes as Star Wars is kind of an inflection point. While it's been successful on the small screen, helping to drive subscribers on Disney Plus, it struggled to kind of get the films off the ground. There hasn't been a feature in the theaters since 2019. There was a few announced at Star Wars Celebration, including one from Filoni. And of course, there is the Ahsoka series he did, and the animated stuff like Clone Wars and Rebels. But yeah, Filoni, he says, I'm not telling people what to do. He says, but I do feel I'm trying to help them tell the best story that they want to tell. I need to be a help across the galaxy here, just like a part of the Jedi Council almost. Now, this comes along with talk about maybe Ahsoka season 2. I'm mixed on this because I think Filoni really does have a good handle on the Star Wars universe, but I think he's also a bit of a one-trick pony, where he seems to like to create stories that involve with a loner character suddenly becoming tied to a child. And he does that a lot. It's pretty much what Clone Wars was when Anakin got tied to, or Ahsoka got tied to Anakin. It's the plot of The Mandalorian. It's, the Bad Batch. They get stuck with a young child clone. Skeleton Crew is kind of that, except for it's Jude Law with a bunch of children. And the plan isn't quite the plan. It's kind of the other way around. Hulu and Disney Plus will kind of merge into one, and Disney Plus will be the main driving force. So Disney Plus is the better marketing name. But Disney is buying out the rest of Hulu, and they are going to merge it into one streaming service, is what I understand. So, all right. So Dave Filoni is becoming the grand poobah of the Star Wars universe. I'm hoping that he does help them tell the best stories, but I don't want him to be the only storyteller because, like I said, he does seem to be a bit of a one-trick pony. I like when he's working with Filoni, with Jon Favreau a little better than when he's on his own. I think his stories are a little better. I think the stories are told better when he's working with someone else. I think the biggest problem I had with Ahsoka is there was a whole lot of telling us what was going on, telling us how people felt about each other, telling us about the history of characters, where the old adage is show, don't tell. He does a lot of telling. So that's my biggest knock against Filoni. And I'm hoping that doesn't become the norm. So, all right, let's move over to talk about Superman Legacy. Now, the big news we got yesterday was, of course, that British actor Nicholas Hoult had been cast as Lex Luthor. And the reports say that he was pretty much the choice from jump, that the plan was always to bring in a bigger kind of serious name person to opposite of the fact that their new Superman, David Cornsweet, is a relative newcomer. So to offset that, they wanted to go with somebody more established. Nicholas Hoult is definitely established. He's been in a lot of different things. You look at, he was Beast in Days of Future Past and the X-Men Going Forward. He was also in the recent Renfield movie. Yeah, he's done a lot of films. And he's also been kind of the runner-up on the last two big DC castings. Supposedly, he just got beat out to play Batman in Matt Reeves' movie by Robert Pattinson. And then he was also in consideration to play Superman and lost out to David Cornsweet. So he's been floating around DC for quite some time. It makes perfect sense that he gets pulled in for a character like Lex. My biggest concern isn't the casting. I think Nicholas is going to be great. We've seen him with a shaved head. That's not going to be a problem. He's got the acting chops to pull it off. He's got the look to pull it off. My biggest concern is the mistake they keep making with Superman movies is they do not seem to understand what Lex Luthor really is. If you look at the Christopher Reeves movies, or you look at Bryan Singer's love letter to the Christopher Reeves movies, or the Richard Donner movies, they make Lex Luthor into a megalomaniac and somebody obsessed with real estate scams. I don't consider real estate scams particularly evil. I love Gene Hackman, but I don't necessarily think that was the best Lex Luthor ever. I didn't think Kevin Spacey was just playing Gene Hackman. When it comes to Lex Luthors that I think are really good, I look at Michael Rosenbaum's character on Smallville first, a little bit of John Cryer's interpretation of it on the Arrowverse, or Clancy Brown's version on the animated series, where they play him to be a narcissistic personality disorder. Lex doesn't want to rule the world. Lex doesn't want to have all the power in the world. That's not him. Lex wants to be revered. He wants to be the richest, the most powerful man in Metropolis. He wants to be beloved. He wants to be the hero. Yes. Superman comes along and is everything Lex can't be. He's a true hero. He's got super strength. He's got flight. He's got all those abilities. He, in a way, lessens Lex just by existing, which is what puts them in conflict. But you can also see it in the fact that Lex does stuff like charitable work, and stuff, and sometimes he's a good guy. Well, those things come from the fact that he wants everyone to love him. He wants to be the hero. He wants to be, the the heart of Metropolis. And he'll kill Superman to put himself back there, and he'll destroy Metropolis if he needs to put himself back there. Like I said, it's a very serious mental diagnosis, but it fits him. And I did an entire, there it is. Thank you, Jay. Jay just posted. I did a deep dive into Lex Luthor and what makes him tick, and where the movies have gone wrong and where the TV shows have gone right. On that breakdown, Psychology of Villainy. I also did one on the Riddler. So I'm going to do more of those. I just have to pick a villain and get to it. But so as long as James Gunn approaches Lex in the right way, I think it's going to be fine. But if he tries to turn him into a megalomaniac, then he's just going to be the same bad villain that Jesse Eisenberg played. So, this, of course, is the first movie that's going to come out from the new DC universe or DC Studios that Gunn is working on with Peter Safran. But that's not the only casting they've announced. We had 2 more castings since then. One of them worries me just a touch, and the other was pretty cool. Skylar Gisondo who comes from the show The Righteous Gemstones, has been cast as Jimmy Olsen, and I think this works. He's got that boyish look. He's got the freckles and the reddish hair. He also was in Booksmart. He was in the Amazing Spider-Man movies as Gwen Stacy's brother. So from that point of view, I think it was great casting. The other person they cast, Sarah Sampaio from At Midnight, has been cast as Eve Tessmacher. Now, Eve Tessmacher, most of us know, is Lex Luthor's personal assistant and potential love interest. But this isn't a character from the comics. If they were going to do something more serious, comic related, they would have gone with Mercy. And, who's the driver bodyguard for Lex Luthor. But with them going with Tessmacher was created in the Richard Donner films. She was put in there played by Valerie Perrine. And again, kind of a sex symbol, comedic thing. And I think I would have preferred if they would have gone with Mercy instead of Tessmacher. But, Sarah Sampaio is a actress and a model. She's done a lot of Victoria's Secret's work. She was in the rom-com At Midnight with Monica Barbaro, Diego Boneta. She was also in the dramedy The Clapper with Ed Helms and Amanda Seyfried, and was in the show Billion. So she's got good acting credentials as well. I'm hoping for a more serious Lex Luthor, and Miss Tessmacher doesn't normally, Mercy Graves, thank you. Miss Tessmacher doesn't come across as the type of character that a serious Lex Luthor has around. Now, they may play her serious and they just used her name because, to tie into the Richard Donner films. There's this love affair with the Richard Donner Superman movies. And yes, Lois has already been cast. Rachel Brosnahan is Lois. She's the star of the Marvelous Miss Maisel. So yeah, they have Clark, they have Lois, now they have Lex, Tessmacher, Jimmy, and then we also have Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner. We have Anthony Corrigan as Metamorpho. We have a Hawk Girl. We have a Mr. Terrific, and we have the engineer from the Authority. So this cast is starting to fill out pretty quickly. Anthony Corrigan was great as Zaz on Gotham. He also played the Mist on The Flash, and he's NoHo Hank on the TV series Barry. So this is a guy who's got some really good acting chops too. He hasn't gotten really top billing on anything. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen here. But no, Anthony Corrigan is not only a real good actor, but he also has that look that Rex Mason has for Metamorpho. So, all right, let's go ahead. We're going to take our break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Binary.
There's a comic book universe on the streets of Cleveland. Hero Tomorrow Comics is debuting
Violante, the Undead.
Get the new issue or the entire acclaimed library live on Kickstarter.
I'm coming for you, Cleveland.
Details at clevelandsuperhero.com.
Imagine being at a convention and going to an interview panel that's just for you. No bustling crowds, no hours-long lines, just you, the moderator, and your favorite comic book creators. Well, this is pretty much that. Miss Jen sits down every week with 2 comic book creators for a live stream interview about their latest work, and you can ask them whatever you want. It's Talking Shop, Mondays at 5 Eastern on The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales.
To be continued. 3 little words that hold the secret to the next great story. 3 words that will thrill you, confound you, give life to new possibilities. Every variation of To Be Continued is a promise of adventure, a promise of excitement, a promise of unseen wonders and unexplored worlds, a promise that every issue you read makes you a part of a never-ending journey, and behind every page there will be an unopened door waiting for you. This story to be continued at your local comic book shop. Visit comicshoplocator.com today.
Did you know that every Experience show, including some exclusive content, streams on Twitch? Check it out, twitch.tv/the_EXP. Or just scan that QR code.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dan Wickline Show here on The Experience. We've got a fun lineup today after this at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Kyle, Jay, and Miss Jen will be going through this week's new titles, giving you some reviews, so you get a good idea of what to pick up. And then tonight will be Mint Hunter, so stick around for that. Remember to hit that like and subscribe buttons. We're trying to drive to 2,500 subscribers. So please tell your friends, make a few fake accounts and click subscribe on there, whatever it is to get us to 25 by Saturday. And then during the broadcast that we'll be doing for Small Business Saturday, we will be giving away some 1 in 25 variant comics. So let's see. Sorry, Dan, I thought that was my cue. Okay. Ed says, I like that Lois casting so far. The best Lois for me was Terry Hatcher. I love Lois and Clark, other than the way it ended so abruptly. Jay's putting his vote in for Erica Durance on Smallville, which Ed has never watched. That's interesting. It was only on for 10 years. There's a few episodes you might be able to catch. And yeah, Smallville was very good, and it did kind of lead into what would become the Arrowverse. And for like 20 years, basically, the CW was in the superhero business with Smallville, and then Arrow and Flash and Supergirl and Batwoman and Legends of Tomorrow and Black Lightning. And then suddenly we go back to Superman and Lois. And once that ends, CW out of the superhero business. So they began and ended with Superman. Kind of interesting. Betsy Turlock was a pretty good Lois Lane as well. Or Bitsy Turlock. Yeah, Elizabeth Turlock. There have been some good Lois Lanes. I like the casting of Rachel Brosnahan. Be interesting to see how all this pans out. They still need to cast Perry White. There's been some good Perry Whites too. But there's been a lot of rumors about that movie. We know we're going to get some more members of the Authority. We don't know how many or which ones. You know, will we get the Doctor? Will we get Jenny Sparks? Will we get Midnighter and Apollo, or Swift, or Jay Hawksmoor? You know who would be a really interesting Jay Hawksmoor, just thinking, would be Keanu Reeves. But he's supposed to come back as Constantine, so I don't think they'll throw him into a DC movie as a villain, but I think he would be interesting casting. Ed says, when I heard he was just Clark, wasn't going to be Superman, I just never had any interest in watching it. I can understand that, but they did work in a lot of stuff. He never gets to be Superman till the very end, but we do meet a version of the Flash. We meet a bunch of other characters, Hawkman, Booster Gold, Ambush Bug, I think at one point. Yeah, no flying plastic wrap S. Yeah, it's a pretty good show, though. And the Green Arrow we get in there is pretty good, which, of course, led into Arrow. I mean, there was a long time on the air that we had, like 10 years that we had Green Arrow on TV. And as a kid who grew up loving Green Arrow, that's pretty awesome. So, but yeah, there's a lot of characters. They've talked about Brainiac being the big bad. If you guys if you've never watched Krypton, which was the 2-season series that Sci-Fi Channel had about Superman's grandfather, Barry Kitson, I don't remember exactly his name, but the guy that Ritson played Brainiac on there was really good. Sean Sipos played Adam Strange. I thought he was great. Wallace Day played basically Superman's grandmother. Can't remember the name right now, but they were all really good castings. Wallace Day went on, of course, to be in Batwoman. Sean Sipos will be back later in a few weeks as one of the members of Jack Reacher's crew. So he's going to be a regular on the new Reacher season. So, yeah, they also had a version of Lobo on there. So yeah, we had a Superman's grandfather series that included Doomsday, Zod, Lobo, Adam Strange, and Hawkgirl. I mean, it was just bizarre, but it was awesome. And yeah, that's one I would love to see them do more with it, because they just kind of went way out there and just had fun with it. Yeah, Cameron Cuff was Seg L. So it says, not to change topics on you, but what show did the android Chopper from Ahsoka come from? Chopper comes from the Rebels, along with Hera and Zeb, Ezra, and Sabine, and Kanan Jarrus. But we're not, Kanan gets killed in Rebels, but all the other ones. Zeb was that big weird creature we saw in The Mandalorian, talking to Carson Zebia, and then Sabine, of course, was Ahsoka's apprentice. Ezra's who they went out and found, and Hera was the girl with the green tentacles, the general. So those are all from Rebels. You could watch Rebels, catch up, and it's a really good series. You could do that without watching Clone Wars, and you'll be fine. So, all right, let's get into binary. Now, I'm doing this one because it fascinated me when I saw the clip from the Marvels. And in one of the post-credit scenes, we see Maria, spoilers, put the spoiler thing up, Jay, just in case, for people who haven't seen the Marvels. Thank you, sir. So we're going to talk about the post-credit scene where Monica is able to close the incursion, but she ends up on the other side in the other universe. And she wakes up with Maria Rambeau at her bedside, who is not her mother in this and who doesn't have any children. And Hank McCoy, the Beast, looking over her as well. Hank McCoy, of course, is Kelsey Grammer, who was the Beast in X3 and also at the very end of Days of Future Past. So Rebels isn't that many seasons, and I know there was a movie too. So, but it should be easier to catch up on. It's all on Disney Plus. So Lashana Lynch, of course, plays Maria, and when we see her, again, she's never had kids, so she doesn't know that this is her daughter from another universe. But she has powers. But unlike Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, where Maria is Captain Marvel, here she is another one of Carol Danvers' comic aliases, Binary. But Binary is a very different character from Captain Marvel. And if you're not familiar with the backstory on Carol Danvers, it is one of the most convoluted and problematic characters Marvel's ever had. Carol Danvers first appeared all the way back in 1968 in Marvel Superheroes number 13, which was also the first appearance of Captain Marvel. They were created by Roy Thomas and Gene Colan. And in this, Carol is an officer in the Air Force and the security chief in a restricted military base where she meets Dr. Walter Lawson. Now, this is the human alias of the Kree hero Marvel, or Captain Marvel. Now, there's an incident. She is caught in an explosion of a Kree device, and this Kree device, when it explodes, affects her, but she is saved by Captain Marvel. And she sustains injuries and pretty much just disappears for like 9 years. Now, most of this is pretty similar to what happens in the MCU, except for Walter Lawson becomes Wendy Lawson, played by Annette Bening, and the Kree device ends up becoming the Tesseract or Space Stone. But the explosion gives her the powers. Now, Danvers comes back in 1977 in the pages of Miss Marvel #1. So she gets her own comic. It's from Jerry Conway and John Buscema. But Jerry is not on the book very long. A newer writer comes in, a guy named Chris Claremont. And Chris Claremont just falls in love with this character and ends up doing a lot with her, even when other people screw her up. Now, we find out that the explosion caused her DNA to meld with Captain Marvel's, and she ends up becoming this human Kree hybrid, and she ends up with similar powers to Captain Marvel's. And this is where she takes on the name Miss Marvel or Ms. Marvel. And of course, this was during the late 70s. This was during the women's movement. So, the women liberation thing, she takes MS period instead of MISS. So they've still put her in like sexy outfits and stuff, but they gave her the Ms. moniker. So, and she would end up not only having her own adventures, but teaming up with like the Defenders and Spider-Man, the Thing and Iron Man. And she was doing all right. And then in Avengers #200 in 1980 is where things get problematic. In what may be one of the just worst storylines Marvel's ever done. Bob Layton, David Michelini, George Perez, and Jim Shooter put out this story, where Miss Marvel is kidnapped by a new character named Marcus, who is supposed to be the son of Immortus. And Immortus, of course, is a descendant or is a variant of Kang. And she is taken to an alternate dimension, yes, Avengers 200, where she is raped and impregnated, then returned to Earth, where she gives birth to a child that rapidly ages into a version of Marcus. Now, Hawkeye ends up damaging the machine Marcus is using to travel, and it forces him to return to the ultimate dimension, and Miss Marvel is going to go with him, and the Avengers are fine with that and kind of miss out on the whole fact that she was potentially brainwashed. Yes, Beckerman is right. This is the most cringe comic book ever. Now, again, none of the Avengers stop her, and one of the people to come out and complain about the inappropriateness of this book was Chris Claremont. Now, Chris tried to make amends, but in doing so, I'm not sure how much he did. But in Avengers Annual #10, where he works with Michael Golden, he brings Carol Danvers back to Earth, saying that Marcus continued his rapid aging and died of old age, and then she was returned. This is also where the mutant Rogue is introduced, and she uses her powers to basically permanently absorb Carol Danvers' abilities and memories. And we find out through flashbacks and stuff, I don't know if it's here or in other books, that she's got this long history with Mystique. They're kind of enemies, and Mystique had Rogue do this. And a lot of Rogue's powers that aren't from her mutation of being able to absorb powers comes from this contact with Carol Danvers. It's how she flies and how she's strong and stuff like that. So basically, Carol Danvers is depowered. Professor X is able to get her memories back for her, and she then confronts the Avengers about them pretty much just ignoring the fact she had been brainwashed and raped. Yeah, it's not a very good... Claremont is basically calling Marvel to task for doing that story. But to do it, he also stripped Carol Danvers of all her powers. Now, but he doesn't leave her that way. he keeps her around. He uses her as kind of an ally to the X-Men. She uses her clearance as an Air Force officer to get into the Pentagon and wipe away any record of the X-Men or herself, because that's how computers work. You can just go in and but then she ends up with them in outer space. She gets experimented on by the alien race known as the Brood. If you're not familiar with the Brood, it's pretty much what if Marvel decided to do xenomorphs. It's also the first X-Men storyline I ever read as a kid, which is really weird place to start on the X-Men. But yeah, this was just a lot of weird stuff happened here too. But she gets experimented on. And in the experiments, she ends up being able to tap into a white hole, which I believe is also the nickname that Claremont had for David Michelini and his idea of Avengers 200. That's my own little joke there. But so she gets these abilities and has basically the ability to generate the power of a star, and she takes on the name Binary. And this is a whole new set of powers. You know, her head turns into this big flaming star, and she gets the red and white costume. And basically she becomes an X-Men and teams with the X-Men and the New Mutants and Excalibur and some solo adventures and stuff like that. Now, this goes on for a while, and then eventually she loses her connection to the white hole, but somehow she regains her Miss Marvel powers, takes on the name Warbird for a while, eventually takes on the name Captain Marvel. But let's stick with Binary instead of following down that, because there's a modern day version of Binary too. They brought the character back not that long ago. And this happened when, as Captain Marvel, Carol is trapped in the equivalent of a Faraday cage, and she can't use her powers. And this is done by Vox Supreme. So trying to manipulate her photon blast differently, she ends up kind of borrowing from how Monica Rambeau uses her powers and ends up creating a cosmic duplicate of herself, but as Binary. So it's like she taps into the powers that she lost and created a new version of Binary who is just a clone of her. So Binary helps her escape. She eventually reabsorbs the energy duplicate, but ends up using her again to take on Vox Supreme once more. So this character pops around, and eventually they kill off this energy clone. But the whole idea is that they brought Binary back. So this version of Carol Danvers is very specific to the X-Men. This is not when she was an Avenger. And I mean, because it's as Miss Marvel or Captain Marvel or even Warbird that she's associated with the Avengers. It's Binary who is with the X-Men. Now, let's go back and talk about that post-credit scene. Monica is found by, or it wakes up with Maria Rambeau, who has the persona of Binary, and Hank McCoy, and it looks like they're in the X-Mansion or something to do. It looks like they're in an X-Men base. There's a reference to Charles wanting an update. So what this tells me is, A, we are not on 813, the planet from Multiverse of Madness, because Monica is alive. To me, Maria is alive and has different powers, or a different costume at least. And Charles is alive, both of whom on 813 got killed by Wanda. So this tells me it's a different universe. The fact that Kelsey Grammer is back as Hank McCoy makes it lean towards the X-Men Fox universe, the one with, Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart, stuff like that. Again, Kelsey Grammer joined with X-Men 3. He was around. They showed him at the end of Days of Future Past. So that is most likely the universe we're looking at, or something close to that. And that'll be likely part of how the Avengers get brought over, or the X-Men get brought into the universe. But it makes sense that if you're going to bring an X-Men character in and you're going to show Maria as a superhero at that point, that they went with the persona that is Carol's persona that is closest to the X-Men. Because Maria Rambeau isn't really a character in the Marvel Comics. So they created her for the movies. So borrowing Carol's personas makes sense. I mean, she even has where in the comics, Binary has a star on her chest to show her tie to the white hole and to a binary star. But here it's more X's. So they're really tying her into the X-Men stuff. So I think this is really the opening that is going to be how we get the X-Men into the MCU. And I think that's why they went with Binary and why she's a unique character. In a lot of ways, I think she was Chris Claremont's way of trying to get the character back he liked, but just separating her from all the BS of Avengers 200. Now, it's a little girlfriend in the fridge for my taste, even what he did by having Rogue come along and steal her powers and her memories, but then give her memories back. And then she gets experimented on by an alien race. It is a lot of just manipulation of Carol Danvers. There's not a lot of agency for this character. You know, she gets her powers because of an accident. She gets manipulated by Marcus. She gets manipulated by the Brood. You know, there is a lot of problems in this character's background. So the fact that they're trying to clean it up and they're trying to pull from it without pulling from it, you're never going to see the Marcus storyline in the MCU. There's no way in hell they do that story. So, but yeah, that's pretty much Binary and why I thought it was interesting they brought that character in and what her connection is to the X-Men. So I hope that gives you a little background on the character maybe you didn't have before. But yeah, I think this is the vehicle they're going to use. And I think when we get to Secret Wars, those characters will be coming in. And I think that's when we'll get Monica back as well, is when everything comes together in Secret Wars. She may not be around until then. Or she might show up in Deadpool 3. You know, or that'll be the next place where if it is the Fox universe and that's going to be how they do it, then Deadpool connecting to it is going to be interesting. You know, I don't think we're going to make the connection by the end of Deadpool 3. I think it's going to wait for Secret Wars. But yeah. Triple B says, I can't wait for the X-Men to show up. I think it's going to be interesting. It's funny. Jim Beard and I do Pop Go the Writers on Sunday. And we both were excited by one of the post-credit scenes and disappointed in the other. But it's the opposites. Jim doesn't want the X-Men in the MCU. he says there's enough characters already. He'd prefer that the X-Men kind of be off on their own like they were with Fox, and we can get X-Men movies over here and Avengers movies over here. And I can understand that, but I'm cool with the X-Men coming in. I grew up with all the characters being together. That's what I want. Now, the flip for me, he's excited at the introduction of the new Avengers, and I don't want the new Avengers. Because I look at, there's still like 40 years worth of comics to choose from before Allen Heinsberg ever created the new Avengers. There are so many amazing stories involving all these characters, Hawkeye and Iron Man and Hulk, that they could do that took place in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, that it just feels like we're rushing to the more modern day heroes and not really giving time to some of these other characters. You know, it reminds me of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man run. You know, he did the first one with Green Goblin. He did the second one with Doc Ock, and they were both awesome. And in the third one, he's trying to do Sandman, and the studio goes, nope, we need Venom. And they forced him to wedge Venom into the movie. And I think that the Spider-Man movies could have kept going and go through more and more of the gallery of villains long before they ever get to Venom and do well. But they felt they needed to get to Venom because that was the hot villain that everybody wanted. So I don't want to get to the Young Avengers yet. I feel like there's still so many stories to tell with so many of these characters. We could do a Defenders story with the actual Defenders of Doctor Strange, Hulk, Namor, and Silver Surfer, and bring in Hellcat and Nighthawk. You know, and there's all these great stories, like I said, from before the turn of the century that we're just glossing over to rush to these newer characters. It's like when people come out and say, well, we want Nova, but they want the new Sam Nova and not Richard Rider. It's like, can we just, or all the people that want to get to Miles Morales. It's like, we've still got all these other things to do. So. Jay says, I get what he's saying, but there are some people that won't watch unless it's tied to the MCU. That's true. And he says, that's why I wish this show was 30 minutes to an hour longer. So much to discuss. I don't know if my voice would last. And it says, your Sunday show was amazing, but buried. It was only like 30 seconds long. Brief, yeah. Well, you showed up late, Ed. There was a whole beginning to the show. So, yeah, you can go back and watch it, or it'll be replayed here on the experience. All right, guys, I ran a little long, and I forgot to do the last break, but we are going to wrap this up. I will be back tomorrow. I'm not 100% sure what we're going to do on the show tomorrow. I've got some ideas. But there won't be a show on Thursday because of the holiday. So, but join me tomorrow. We'll be back, and stick around for Minute to Skim It with Jay and Kyle and Miss Jen. And, of course, tonight with Mint Hunter. See y'all tomorrow. Good night.
Join the party. Head over to our Linktree to find all the links for everywhere the experience is all the time.